You're listening to Boobies and Newbies, brought to you by the Frolic Podcast Network. Welcome to Boobies and Newbies, the podcast that asks novice romance readers to think outside the dick in a box and brave the unbridled world of erotica. I'm your host, Kelly Reynolds, and today we're kicking off a new year and a new season with a Steamy Spotlight author interview. Today's episode marks the start of Boobies and Newbies' 4th season, and I know what you're all thinking. I can't believe it either. Whether you're a longtime listener or this is your very first time checking out the podcast, thank you so much for giving this goofy gal a chance to do what she does best, talk, because you'll find out soon enough that I love to talk, especially when it's something I cherish as much as the romance genre. But we're doing things a little different today because today's guest has written a book all about romance, or should I say lack thereof. In her hilarious guidebook, Single and Forced to Mingle, Melissa Croce shares tips and tricks for how to graciously endure the various scenarios in which single people often find themselves. From attending yet another friend's wedding to answering all of Aunt Carol's nosy questions at Christmas. Along the way, you'll find games like Millennial Mash and quizzes like Create Your Perfect Date and we'll give you a millennial-approved solitary hobby to take up. Apparently, I'm destined for tarot cards. Please join me in welcoming the author of Single and Forced to Mingle, a guide for nearly any socially awkward situation, Melissa Croce.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. We made it. It's 2021. It might just be 2020 part 2, but who knows? I'm going to be optimistic.
Yeah, why not? I mean, why not be hopeful? I mean, I don't want to say it can't get any worse because, as my mother likes to always say, it can always be worse. So I won't say that in seriousness, but you know what? Why not have hope at this point? You might as well have something.
Yeah, you know what? I feel like we talked about it a little bit before we started recording, but there are some things to look forward to. Come mid-January, we're going to have a new president in the White House, a new vice president, a whole new team. I mean, that alone, like I was counting down, I feel like less to New Year's and more to the president being sworn in.
Yeah, I mean, there was someone really smart was like, hey, I just had this idea. Like, if you go the day after Christmas and buy, like a 50% off advent calendar and you start it the next day, you have enough candies that will lead up to the inauguration. So it's an inauguration advent calendar. And I was like, that is the smartest thing I've ever heard in my life. I love that.
That's brilliant. Although I think I would do it with one of the ones where you get like little bottles of booze, like because I mean, I totally understand if people want to stay drunk and just not completely cognizant of what's happening from now until the swear-in.
Yeah, it's like every day a fresh new horror. Like, what part of the presidency is that man going to desecrate on his way out? How many like criminals is he gonna like pardon, etc.
Yeah, exactly. Only time will tell, but you know what? We're almost there. It really is like the final countdown. Like, I have that song playing in my head nonstop. We are so close, but anyway, what's on your, 2021 docket? Like, do you do the resolutions? Do you think about goals and bucket list items and all that jazz?
I do, because if there's one thing I've learned about myself is that I'm very competitive with myself. Like, if I'm going to get anything done, it has to be like a game to me. You know what I mean? So like, I'm very like, and I get a rush when I have a checklist and I can check things off.
Yes.
So, I think with resolutions, I kind of frame them more as like goals. Like, you know what I mean? I try not to make it like stressful on myself. So, like for instance, I did my goals yesterday. I think one of them, is as simple as like staying in contact with people who are important to me.
Well, that's a great one.
Yeah, or like, learn something new. And I was like, that can be a skill, or it can just be like a fun fact, or, a hobby. I try and not make it so like you need to lose like 25 pounds, or like you
Oh,
need to, you know what I mean? Like I try not to
yeah.
make it stuff like that. I try and,
I'm so done with that too. Like, honestly, I would
yeah.
start for years. Like, I've always been a big woman. And I'm like, I would start years with like, okay, I have to lose this amount of weight,
Hmm.
and I'm just like, there's a way to like frame that in a much more positive light. Like nowadays, what I tell myself is like, this is the year where instead of like saying I'm going to lose a certain amount of weight or I want to be a certain size pants, like it's just going to be I want to go for a walk every day for at least 30
Hmm.
minutes, because if you make something like that your routine, you will develop like healthier habits and everything. So I think it's just about like the way you frame it. And I'm with you. I love setting goals. I don't like calling them resolutions because I don't know. There's something about the word that I feel like just it's like this whole idea of resolved, like you're solving a problem. And it's like, I'm not trying to solve a problem. I'm just trying to improve an area of my life that is already good, but could be better.
Right. I think that word kind of reminds me of like, okay, granted, I've never read this book to like be totally transparent, but like the seven, like, habits of highly effective people, like it's
Yes.
very, oh God, I don't even know the word, but you know what I mean? It's that sort of like very goal oriented,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like language, like getting things done sort of a thing. I even have kind of like a daily checklist of things that, I want to, it's kind of like a self-care checklist. I feel like, especially during the beginning of the pandemic,
Yeah.
you kind of like, I feel like I neglected myself, like even just like, you're like, oh, should I shower today or like brush my hair? So I even have, things like that to remind myself, just to be like, okay, like make sure you take your vitamins, or like, you know what I mean? Like make sure, you don't forget to floss so my dentist doesn't yell at me. And then I had that listed as my schedule, and it was like a daily schedule. And then one of my friends on Instagram, she likes to post like parenting tips, and they're so smart. Like I don't have kids or anything, but like, she was like, instead of as a mom putting so much pressure on myself to keep my kid to a routine or schedule, she calls it like a daily like rhythm. And I really liked that sort of
Yes.
reframing. So I kind of changed that to like what's my ideal daily rhythm? Like what do I want? Like what does my ideal day, like what is the shape of that day? You know what I mean? And
I
it's
like
kind of
that.
makes it, yeah, using that framework kind of makes it seem softer, and being like, okay, visualize, what you need to do, like what your day looks like, so that you feel good. How are you taking care of yourself? And like, not necessarily spending money on like face creams or bath bombs, but like what are the things that you need to do in order to, maintain a healthy habit? So, that's
Yes.
kind of, like mine is like, drink water, and yeah,
Oh,
take your
yeah.
vitamins. I even put on there like make sure you journal. And my roommate got me into the habit of doing, we would do yoga together in the morning before work, and I never considered myself a yoga person. um, but I do it every day now, and that has really really helped me. And actually I looked back on my goals for 2020, and one of them was to create and maintain like healthy habits, and I think I put there as examples like drink more water
Oh,
and
good
like
for you.
stretch. And, I was like, okay, well, the pandemic sucked, and it still sucks. But like, I, sort of inadvertently had to reshape my whole day. And, by incorporating doing exercising at home, or like,
Yes.
taking walks around my home, that sort of, it's very much a habit now. Like, I know now that I don't feel as good if I don't, do something active or do yoga
Yeah.
once a day. So that's kind of been an unexpected positive thing that's come out of this. So yeah, so that's a long way of saying I like goals, I like resolutions. I just try and frame them in a way that makes it still is enticing to my competitive side, but doesn't stress me out. You know what I mean? None of this should
Yeah.
make me feel bad about myself
Yeah,
in
because
any way.
you don't want to feel bad if you don't check off every single item on the checklist, you know? Like, and I'm with you. I think organization and like list making is sexy as hell. Like
Mm-hmm.
I have different colored pens for different
Yep.
items. I
Yep.
have different shapes and sizes of Post-its. I mean,
Yes.
I'm one of the few people I think who uses a physical planner. Like I love a physical
Oh,
planner book.
yes.
Like, oh,
Same.
but no, I'm with you. I think those are all great healthy habits and they're all very attainable. Like none of them
Mm-hmm.
are so reaching for the stars. And I think that's the thing is like when it comes to resolutions, a lot of the time we tend to make like these giant goals. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that could lead to bigger disappointment as opposed to I'm going to make these goals for things that I can genuinely start doing today and continue doing every day, like stretching, which I need to do more of. And, self-care, like it is not just treating yourself once a week to
Right.
a bubble bath. Ever since I moved into an apartment with a clawfoot tub, let me
Mhm.
tell you, oh, I am in that bathtub like multiple hours of the day.
I love baths.
Because I
Yes. I took one
can.
last night. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the best. So, whatever it is, I like this idea of like less of a routine and more of like the shape of my day. And I'm like trying to think like what would my day be shaped like? I keep thinking it would be like heavy on the top half and less heavy on the bottom half. So like
Yeah.
an upside down pear.
Right. Absolutely. And mine would kind of be like I think mine would probably be the opposite. I'm not a morning person. Like
Okay.
I need a couple hours to like fully wake up. So mine would be like doing like gentle things in the morning. Like
Mm,
I subscribe to Poem a Day. And so that's the first thing I do when I get up. I check my email and I read a poem. That's how I start off my day. So I kind of like ease into. I try not to check social media for, at least 30 minutes, which is,
yes.
a struggle. But I was like, okay, I can always start my day off, with a poem and, gradually just get into it. And then I'm a night owl. So, but I think honestly, like I'd want to get the bulk of my day done, um, around by dinner time, I want to say,
Yeah.
so that I can have the evening to, read and write and just like, daydream, kind of that sort of a thing.
And I know that that's a struggle with everybody working from home. Like I think people are under the impression that when you work from home, you have a lot more time that's flexible to chill out and not do anything. And like in theory, you do have the possibility of literally walking into the next room or hell, if you live in a studio apartment like I do, just a couple steps away from your
Mm-hmm.
desk is your bed. But at the same time, if you don't create some sort of like structure for your work schedule, then you do have days where you work for a couple hours, you take a break, you work for a couple more hours, and then it's 11 p.m. before you know it, and you're still at your computer. So that's something that I definitely want to work on a little bit more of. I know it's tough, and my heart goes out to everybody too, especially who has a partner or children, or you're living with
Mm-hmm.
multiple members of your family. Like it's a juggling act. Like there's a lot going on, and doing that juggling act with more people just makes it even more complicated. So but yeah, no, I'm with you. I think for me, I could definitely do with a lot more stretching, and there will absolutely be plenty more reading because there's no avoiding that in either of
No,
our worlds.
no, there really is not. So they definitely have to set aside a lot of time to read for sure.
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about your delightful book because this is the first book that I'm reading in the new year. And I don't know if it's setting a tone for my 2021 or not, but if it is, let me tell you, I will be very happily single and forced to mingle. Although I'm happy to cut out the mingling part of that as well. Like if it's just single, that's absolutely fine by me.
Yeah, I don't really know how much in-person mingling we're gonna be
Right.
doing in 2021. I mean, fingers crossed for the vaccine, but everything I've heard about the rollout is iffy, to be generous. So,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think probably the most mingling I'll be doing in person is, fingers crossed for the summertime, doing more, socially distanced outdoor picnicking was a
Yes.
staple of my social life for a
Yes.
good chunk of the summer. So, and if that's it, so be it. That was really fun actually. So, but yeah, I think that's probably going to be the extent of it for me at least.
Hey, no worries. And you know what? That sounds great to me as well. So, okay, let's start at the beginning because I
Hmm.
know that this book was inspired by a brochure that you made that went viral online. It was
Yes.
featured on BuzzFeed. You were on Good Morning America talking about
Yeah.
it. So, let's start there. And just in case any of our listeners somehow missed it, can you just kind of brief everybody about the brochure you created and more importantly, just sort of what led to its creation?
So basically, what led to its creation is that, like, I'll take a joke and then I'll just run with it. I don't want to say I take a joke too far because that has sort of like controversial connotations, but basically, what was happening was, I was coming. I live in Brooklyn. I live in New York, but I'm from the Seattle area, and I was gonna come back to the Seattle area a couple summers ago for my cousin's wedding. And I hadn't seen, a lot of my family and a lot of family friends in a while. So I was at work and I was joking with my coworkers. And a lot of us are, young women who are about the same age, and a good chunk of us are, single. So we were sort of like commiserating on, dating and family. And I was kind of joking, sort of like, oh, like, I'm looking forward to, going and seeing everybody, but, there's going to be so many questions, and they're going to be the
Mm-hmm.
same questions. And, for anybody who lives in New York or who lives in a big city in general, or somewhere that's not, their hometown, and they go back, I'm sure a lot of your family and friends have a lot of questions about, you living in that city, or, whatever. And some of them can be genuinely like, oh, that sounds so fun. And then some of them kind of, might have like a tone to them, like, oh, like, you live in New York, like, isn't it like dirty and there's lots of crime and the subway is
It's
terrible?
so dirty. Like, and there's so much. I mean, for me, it was LA. So there's so much
Hmm.
traffic everywhere you
Yes.
go.
And they're like, I could, like, visiting New York is fun, but I could never live there. And it's just these things where you're like, that is very, like, it's so unnecessary. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure they mean probably nothing by it. They're just not thinking and making small talk, but you know what I mean? It's just that kind of thing where it's like, can you just like think for a second about the person you're talking to, like,
Like,
read the
I
room.
would have been perfectly fine if you decided not to add anything to this conversation.
Right. Right. Or just like, oh, thank you so much for telling me that the place I've lived for like the past half decade is like dirt under your shoe. Great. Anyway,
Garbage.
so right. So I was anticipating, maybe, some of that stuff, or like jokingly. And I was like, I should just like make a brochure. I should just make a brochure that gives them like FAQs about, my life in New York, my job in publishing, which, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about that as well. And then, of course, me being single, and which is, regardless of where you live or what your job is, if you're single and you're at a wedding, you will probably get questions about it.
Yep.
So, my coworkers and I were just joking back and forth, and I was like, ha ha ha. And, we go our separate ways, and I fly home, and I'm like, what if I just made this brochure? Like, you know what I mean? Like, for fun. I was like, I have the day off. I think it was like the day before my cousin's wedding or something. And so I go on Canva, and there's a brochure template. And so I made it, and I put it on my Instagram and my Twitter. And I was like, here's something fun for like the 6 coworkers who I had this conversation with, just to show them like, haha, I did it. I couldn't let the joke die. I actually made a brochure. And then on Twitter was where it picked up. And, at first it was just like my friends liking it and leaving comments. And then, the Twitter algorithm where it's like, oh, if your friend liked this, then you'll
Mm-hmm.
see that they liked it. And so I think it kind of, spiraled or escalated from there. And, BuzzFeed reached out and DM'd me on Twitter. And so I did an interview with them over email. And I honestly thought it would just be sort of like a blip, kind of like in a roundup post of like, funny things on the internet. And then, when the reporter messaged me and she was like, oh, just want to let you know that the link's up. I already knew because I stupidly had notifications on for Twitter, and I could see that it got more likes and retweets in a, startling way.
Right.
And it was on the front page, like the front page, whatever you call it, like the front page of BuzzFeed, like the top header. I was like, oh my God. then I think the day that the BuzzFeed article came out, I got a DM from a woman who said that she was a producer for Good Morning America, and she was interested in my story, and she wanted to, see if I'd be interested in coming on the show. And I was kind of like, is this a joke? Nothing on
Yeah,
her
what a
about her Twitter.
whirlwind.
And she called me not 5 minutes later, and we set it up for the next week. And then I went on Good Morning America, and the time frame for all of this, I would say, was about 10 days. So
yeah, so whirlwind indeed. I mean, it's
truly.
what started as just like a funny little joke between you and a few coworkers turned into
Mhm.
this giant internet phenomenon that then somehow became a book. So, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
curious, how did the idea evolve from this, just silly, witty brochure that, I think you had talked about basically being a joke that you would hand out to family at home to explain why you're single. And how did it go from that to becoming this guidebook for single millennials? Like, had you always wanted to write a book, or was this more of just sort of like the opportunity presented itself?
Yeah, kind of more of the latter. I think when I was a kid, I really wanted to write, but as I was an adult, I kind of was just like, that wasn't something I took super seriously. But basically, so I work in publishing, so obviously I have a lot of contacts in a network, I will say, plainly. And some of my friends were like, you should make this into a book. And I was like, this brochure into a book? Like, I truly was like, I will
Mm-hmm.
take my 2 seconds of fame and just be happy with this 10-day whirlwind, essentially. They were like, no, I think you could absolutely make this into a book. And they said this to me, I think, when the BuzzFeed article came out, but they were telling this to me and they didn't know about Good Morning America yet. I was like, okay, like, like, why not? You know what I mean? Like, say yes, like Shonda Rhimes it, your year of yes.
Yes.
And so a couple friends and I just opened up basically a Google document, and we were just, kind of spitballing in terms of like what it would look like, what would the tone be, what different like elements and prompts and sections there could be in the book. And then it kind of just, like, again, snowballed from there. One of my friends is an agent, so I was like, all right, let's do this. I know, it's like, I'm sure anyone who's an aspiring author who's listening to this is like, I hate you so much, because the
How
process
dare you?
I know the process in general is so, it is very grueling. So I definitely don't take that for granted at all. But I mean, to be fair, when we were submitting this to Atria, which is the imprint, it did have to go through, it wasn't definitely like, oh, like this person automatically, it did go through the whole rigmarole of, the process in which editors and their teams
Right.
decide if they should buy and publish books. So it did go through that entire thing. But yeah, they were like, okay, so you need to write, basically a proposal, you need to write sample chapters. So I just remember this. So everything went down about mid to late June. And I just remember I was heading up to Boston on a train to visit my friend for the 4th of July weekend. And I was frantically typing these sample chapters, because, gotta capitalize on the 2 seconds of fame. So gotta get everything out as quickly as possible, capitalize on all of the media. So I wrote about, I don't know, maybe like 5 to 10% of the finished book, what is in the finished book, and then sent it off. And then, we finalized everything in August. And yeah, it's nuts. It's been about, I think, a year and a half total since everything went down. So
Yeah, quick turnaround for sure.
quick turnaround. I mean, the book itself is pretty short. It's, I'm not writing the next, like 80,000 word manifesto or anything. So it's a quick read, you guys. It's a good way to ease yourselves into this new year for sure.
Yeah, well, and I have to say, speaking as a single millennial woman, and I
Mhm.
know that, you identify the same way, that
Mhm.
it's very much of our generation. Like the tone is, I mean, it's dark, humorous, sometimes self-deprecating, because let's be honest, I feel like that's millennials in a nutshell. We tend to find the joy and the humor in darker situations that we have to deal with. And so I think in that regards, it's something that, whether you're single or not currently, everyone's been single at some point in their lives. So I think there's plenty that people can connect with. And along with that, if you are a millennial, there's so many fun references. Like, you know, you talk about Hey Arnold and all of these different kids TV shows that I know I grew up with. And there's so much. There's a game of MASH. I mean, that was probably my favorite game to play with friends, you know, growing up. And so there's so much for everyone that whether you're single or not, you're a millennial or not, there's something that you will connect with in this book. And it's one of those ones where I want to grab a copy for like all of my girlfriends and just be like, look, this is us in a book. You're welcome.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that was the goal. And I also wanted it to be, you know, I didn't want it to be like anti-relationship because, you know, I don't begrudge anybody who is in a relationship or who's single and who wants to be in a relationship. Like, I think that that's great. I think honestly, what this book was about was validating choice in your life. You know, it was like, you know, being single isn't like, you know, the consolation prize because you couldn't get a partner. You know what I mean? Like it should be something that is looked at as kindly on as it is for people who are in relationships. Like, you are capable of being happy in a whole person without being in a relationship. And, you know, I think even for people who are in relationships or maybe just got married, like, I think there's a section in there about like why millennials aren't having kids. So, you know what I mean? It's just, it's about choice. Like, you know, you could be single and happy. You could be in a relationship and not have kids. You could be in a relationship and have kids. Like, it's just about, you know, whatever makes you happy. And as long as you're happy and healthy and not doing harm unto others, like, you know, go with God, like, be happy. You know what I mean? Like, do what you got to do. So, that was kind of like the hope for the book, in terms of like not tearing anybody down, but more like elevating people who society is like, oh, sweetie, you're single. That's so sad. Sort of a thing.
Yeah. Poor you. Oh, it's the worst. Yeah. I do. It's so funny. I feel like, and I do want to talk about, you know, the fact that you mentioned it. This definitely is a book that, as much as it highlights the joys of singlehood, there's also wonderful sections you know, that ask how to ask better questions on your dating profile and how to socialize at events. So in no way does this book put down relationships. But as far as the information and, you know, tips and tricks for being single goes, I have to say, I mean, I felt like this book could have been called So You're Single and Forced to Mingle, Kelly. Like, this book spoke to me so much. In fact, I want to share just a quick snippet from the foreword because I think it really sets the tone for what to expect throughout the book. So let me just read a little quick snippet here. Whether you're newly single or have been on this solo journey for a while, I'm glad you're here. Really. After a couple of long-term relationships, I found myself single for the first time in a while, and I soon realized after the heartache faded that the fact of the matter is, being single is awesome. It's been a few years since that epiphany, and I've been single ever since, 100% by choice. I'm sure there are some of you reading this who will think I'm full of shit, but hopefully some of you are also thinking, girl, same, or even, thank God I'm not the only one who feels this way. And that was how I felt exactly. And this was something that actually in one of our holiday episodes this year, I really appreciated as well, was a heroine who made the point of saying, look, it's not that I'm not looking for someone. It's just sort of that I'm very happy with the life that I have. Like, I have a great job. I have great friends. I have a good family. I love my apartment. And if there was somebody else that was a part of that, great. It would be like the cherry on top of the sundae. But I also enjoy the sundae as it is. Like, I don't have to have that to be happy. And that's exactly how I feel. And so I love that I could read that in a romance novel in December and then have it reaffirmed to me in a nonfiction guidebook, you know, for dating and being single in January. So I think this is something that we need to talk about a lot more. And I love that you're putting that conversation out there.
Yeah, that was definitely one thing that, you know, I noticed when the tweet went viral and a lot of people were commenting on it. You know, it didn't matter what their gender was, what their, sexual identity was, even like religion and culture. Like so many people commented and they were like, I relate to this so much. I need
Yeah.
this for my family and my friends. So, I think that this book is definitely geared both in aesthetics and probably content towards like, a cisgendered, like straight woman. But I honestly tried to keep it fairly neutral in regards to hopefully many people of different backgrounds
Mm-hmm.
can relate to some of the stuff in there. But yeah, it's just it's nice to know that you aren't alone, and that hopefully speaking this to a group of people, both so they can feel seen and that other people can maybe think a little bit about the single people in their life and
Yeah. And I think
changing their minds a little. Yeah.
especially during a pandemic when we're finding ourselves more physically isolated in general, that can have effects, on you
Mm-hmm.
mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And so, it's a great reminder that you're not alone in whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling, whether it's related to this book or outside of this, you're not alone. Other people are feeling that way. So what a great way to bring people together. And so here's something that I feel like a lot of single people talk about, because I know I'm one of them and I talk about it all the time. And that's, what is your favorite thing about being single, Melissa?
Oh, my favorite thing about being single is that I don't need to check in with anybody. I don't have to consider anybody else in my plans.
Yep.
Like, in previous relationships, my partners like they were, a couple of them were pretty clingy. Like, they
Mm,
wanted to spend a lot of time together, and which is very sweet and great. But I also am the kind of person where I love my alone time and I like a balanced life. So I definitely don't take for granted the fact that I don't need to check in with anybody. I can just make my plans. Like, also, as I've gotten older, have you done this where you're like, I'm setting aside time for myself, and if anyone tries to encroach on that, I just go, I'm busy. Like, I love being able to.
yes. It's so funny. I feel like when we were younger, when you're a kid and like a friend asks you to like, oh, let's go do this together, you always, if you don't want to do it, at least this is how I was raised, is like if you didn't want to do it, you had to make up some excuse. You had to tell
Mm-hmm.
them like, oh, well, I can't because, thankfully I had parents who were very supportive. So they would say, if you want to use us as an excuse anytime, feel free to do it. Like, mom won't let me, or dad says we have to do something.
Yeah.
But now as an adult, I'm at the point in my life where I can just say, yeah, that sounds great, but I don't want to. Or like, oh, that's really cool, but like I actually need to spend some time by myself tonight. Like I don't want to do anything. So I'm with you. Like I think it's so important to set aside time for yourself, whether you're in a relationship or not.
Yeah. I mean, as one of my former bosses once said, no is a complete sentence. So
Mm,
you don't need to give any excuses if you don't want to. Just be like, I'm so sorry, I'm not free.
yes. I love that. I want to just start replying to people with no, period. Like the end.
Yes, like I think on like Twitter and stuff, people, I think it was like someone once replied to something terrible with just, oh, it was a text where someone was like, I think it was like, Brian, like stop like yelling at your relatives, and he's for being homophobic, and he just responded, he goes, no, period, heart. And so I use that all the time. No, smiley face. Like
Yeah, no, that's no,
I
it's
think,
good. We need to know how
yeah.
to say no.
Yeah, I think especially like, women are brought up to always
Yes.
cater to other people and their
Mm-hmm.
needs. And don't forget about yourself. No one is going to treat you as kindly as you treat yourself. No one is going to know you as well as you know yourself. So you might as well treat yourself very well.
It's
So,
true. I know that looking, in 2021, it's going to take me a while to get used to saying in 2021. But I
hmm
know in 2021 it's difficult to watch one of my favorite shows because it's problematic as hell, but Sex in the City will always be
hmm
one of my favorites. And one of my favorite things Samantha, my queen, has said is, look, I love you, but I'm going to say the one thing that I know you're not supposed to say in a relationship. I love me more. Like I'm the one that I need to focus on. And I'm with you. I think some people will think that's selfish, but it's that whole idea of like you can't put other people's needs ahead of your own, because if you don't take care of yourself, there's no way that you can take care of somebody else.
Right. It's the airline seatbelt thing or the mask thing. You have to help yourself before you help others.
Before you help the children. Yes. Put your
Right.
own mask on.
Right. Exactly. Well, I mean, yeah, I think it's, yeah, I hope people don't think that's selfish, because I also, yeah, I think being selfish connotates like willfully disregarding other people's needs, but I don't think that that's not what that is. It's more just, yeah, it's making sure that you're taken care of, for sure.
I agree. I think it's a deal breaker for me too, if like I'm dating somebody and they you know, to go back to what you were saying, that they have to be with you like 24/7. Like I want somebody who's gonna, you know, have friends of their own and have things that they want to do with their friends. And there can be things that we do with all the friends together. That's fine. But like, I can't be with anybody 24/7. I can't do that with a partner. I can't do that with a roommate. I can't do that with my family. Like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. And I think, you know, speaking very specifically on like cisgender, like heterosexual relationships, I think it has to do with I think that's a common phenomenon, more common than we think, because unfortunately with like toxic masculinity, like men's friendships with other men are not encouraged to be as deep or as emotional as, you know, women's are with each other. And I think there have been a couple of great articles talking about this lately, especially during the pandemic, and how male friendships have changed because of, you know, not being able to like go to a bar and just talk about sports or something. But I think that a terrible consequence of that toxic masculinity, and of course there's always shades falling onto women, is that men use women in romantic relationships to be their emotional anchor for everything. Whereas women, you know what I mean? Like we have
a support system.
Yes, exactly. So I think it's really, you know, toxic masculinity is unfortunate in so many ways, but I think the idea that men can only be emotionally vulnerable with their like monogamous romantic partner like sucks for everybody, you know. So
and we are seeing that big part of it change with like the newer generations. Like I think millennials were kind of the in between. You know, the Gen Zers, man, they have like a whole different way of thinking about and treating relationships that honestly, I know a lot of people shit talk Gen Z, but I think they've got a lot of the right ideas about a lot of great things. So, you know, I'm not going to be on TikTok anytime soon, let's be honest, but setting that aside, how about the flip side? What do you find to be one of the more challenging things about being single, or something that you dislike?
Oh, I will say that sometimes, and I think this is probably like escalated, probably more because of the pandemic, is like I like to cuddle and I miss cuddling. You know, I don't really like cuddle with my friends or anything. Thank God I have a dog. I'll put it that way. Like, I guess I just sort of like, I think that, and I think again, it's probably like a Western society thing too, where it's just like, again, it's most socially acceptable to be that physically close with your romantic partner more than even like your platonic friends. I'm not saying this is true of everybody, obviously, but at least in my experience, you know, like my friends and I hug, but then also, you know, in a pandemic, you're not really seeing friends, you're not really hugging them. So, you know, if I had like a romantic partner, you know, whether they were built in or they were in like my bubble, I think it's more socially acceptable and easier to get, you know, just like hugs and stuff. I was talking with a friend about that, where it's just, we just miss hugging.
It's true.
So I think that is probably something that I think is a benefit of being in a relationship. It's something that you don't really experience as much as a single person, especially to all of my single friends who like live alone. I think, you know, there's something to be said. I'm so glad that I, you know, have a roommate where, you know, even if we're not big huggers with each other, but like, it's just so nice to have another person there in your life to know, again, like the rhythm and shape of your days with you, and they can talk about the minutia with you. So yeah, I think that can be really difficult for single people if they truly are, you know, alone. And I think the pandemic has sort of magnified a lot of that.
Yeah, it's true. And as somebody who I started the pandemic with a roommate and a dog, and then decided to move across the country and live by myself. So that's something that I will say, you know, you do feel the effects of. Now, granted, I'm a very social person. I'm a very goal-oriented person like you. So I tend to keep myself busy. But I think it's more in those moments of either when you're getting ready to go to bed, or you find yourself in the time when like you have finished everything on your to-do list for the day, and now you just sit and what do I do with myself now? You know, because there are those moments where you do want to have a conversation or you do want to cuddle up to somebody. And so I'm with you. I think that's a great thing that we can get from friends, from a partner. And let's be honest. I mean, you live in New York. I'm sure you can find one of those professional cuddlers if you just browse
Oh my
the
God,
pages of
probably.
Craigslist.
Oh my God, probably. I probably could, but that's just opening up a big can of worms.
I know. I'm so curious though. I have so many I'm somebody who loves Craigslist. Like I just find so many fascinations with Craigslist. And so I for sure have seen ads for professional cuddlers on there, and I just want to call them up and be like, tell me more. Like, I don't want you to come over, but I really would love to know what you do and what led you down this path.
Yeah, I want to know like what do they do to make people comfortable, because I'm someone who I feel like has a hard time trusting people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like at least on a certain level. That's the Scorpio coming out. But so I just can't imagine like inviting someone over and then just being like having them open their arms and be like, let's get down to business. You know what I mean? Like also, I feel like I would need to like know them first.
Yeah. And also like what's the hiring process? Like do they audition? Like who is scoring their cuddling and determining that they are good enough to be a professional cuddler? Like I want to know.
Right. I mean, it's like, what's the vibe here? I mean, we all know who would be an A+ cuddler though, is Chris Hemsworth. You know what I mean? Like there's some people where you just know he gives good hugs.
He's got the arms, he's got the smile. He basically looks like a dog, but as a human. Yes. And I mean that in like the biggest complimentary way possible. Absolutely. So yeah, he would be an excellent cuddler.
And he's someone too where you're just like, okay, he just seems very normal and like kind. And you're like, this is a person where I would feel, you know, just comfortable being around. You know what I mean? Like, obviously he's very handsome, but like his whole demeanor, I was like, oh, you would be an excellent therapy dog. You know?
Yes. Chris Hemsworth, my therapy dog. That, by the way, is like one of the movies that we should add to your chapter on wish fulfillment movies that Netflix should make. Like, can you imagine Chris Hemsworth as like a therapy dog? Like, oh, I would watch the shit out of that movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my God. That's all right. Netflix, make that rom-com, or like Hulu or whatever. That was a fun section to revisit, especially in light of all of the holiday movies that came out this year. You know what I mean? That was very fun. I was like, come on, Netflix, I'm handing them over to you.
It's true. And there were a lot of great holiday movies in general, like across the board, like between Netflix, Hulu, obviously the almighty Hallmark, you know, Lifetime. So, I mean, there were a bunch and we needed them this year more than ever. So I think they fulfilled that quota for sure. Let's talk about that chapter, because that's actually one of my favorite chapters in the book. It's chapter 4, called Just a Sweet, Sweet Single Person Fantasy, because along with Millennial MASH and the wish fulfillment movies that Netflix should totally make, you also included a section on if classic literary heroines were modern day millennial women. And what I really loved about this is that several of the characters you highlighted, like Emma Woodhouse, Jane Eyre, Beatrice from Much Ado About Nothing, they're all classic romance heroines. So I'm going to take a wild guess, Melissa, and say that you might be a romance reader.
Yes, I know I wrote this book about being single, but I love romance.
Yay!
I cannot stress that enough. Yes, I genuinely love it. It really helped me through this pandemic to read romance books.
I love it. Do you have any favorites that either you're reading right now or that some of the ones you remember from 2020 that just sort of got you through?
Yeah, totally. So one that I am so obsessed with and I love so much was If I Never Met You by Mari McFarlane. Have you read that one? I
have not.
Oh my God. I can't talk about this book enough. Okay, so basically the premise is this. So there's this woman, her name is Lori, and she's about 35, and she's been with her boyfriend Dan for like 12 years. Like they got together their freshman year in college, and they've been together basically ever since. And they're both lawyers at the same law firm, and they have a great life. But Lori has like, I want to get married, and I'm pretty sure like I want to have kids. Like, and Dan has sort of been like, I don't know if I want to have kids. And so it's been very much a conversation that they've been having. And then one day Dan comes home and he's like, I'm not happy. Like we need to like break up. I know. And Lori is just like devastated. She's like, is this about marriage or kids? Like I can take that off the table. Like, she as a woman like bends over backwards for this man to like try and get him to stay. And he's like, it's not you, it's me, that whole shit. And basically you're kind of like, it's a midlife crisis, right? Like it's kind of just like his own dissatisfaction with his life. It's very evident to the reader right away.
Right.
And Lori's not stupid. She's very smart. So she kind of gets that. She's like, he'll come back on his own. Well, cut to like 3 months later, Dan's in a new relationship, and he got the woman pregnant. And
Stop.
Yes. And Lori basically learns through some snooping that even though he didn't have a physical affair with her, there's evidence where it was like an emotional affair. Yeah. So she's devastated, and it's just so humiliating for her, because even though like she and Dan still work at the same law firm, you know what I mean? So basically Dan is now living this life, and the woman is not like so much younger that it's disgusting, but a few years younger than Lori. So like all of this is terrible. Well, enter Jamie Carter, love of my life. He is also at the law firm, and he is about, I'll say like 5 years younger than Lori and Dan, and he is very hot. He's like a smart dresser. I think the author describes him as like, she pictured Richard Madden, the actor from Game of Thrones,
yes,
as Jamie.
please.
So just to give you that visual, which is pretty close. I actually imagine him as Sebastian Stan. So like very, very close visual. Anyway, so
even better.
Yeah. So that level of hot. And he's very ambitious. He's smart. He's not well liked in the office because I think men view him as a threat.
Okay.
Basically, and all the women want to get with him. But he's kind of he's a player, basically. Not like a terrible one. Like he's very upfront with the women who he dates, that he doesn't want a relationship. He's just there for something casual. You know what I mean? And it's the women who are like, I think I can change him. You can't. Anyway, so
that's what we do best, isn't it?
Right. So he wants to become a partner at the law firm, and the current partners are very old fashioned, and they're like, you're not serious. You're just, this player, like you're too young, all these things. So he and Lori kind of by chance are at the same bar, and they get drunk. And they come up with this idea where Lori's like, I want to make Dan jealous. I want him to want me back. And Jamie is like, I want the partners to know that I'm serious and mature enough, and they really respect Lori. So they're like, let's do fake dating.
Yes. So, my favorite trope in all of romance.
So you're probably thinking, you're like, okay, well, how is this going to go down? Because Jamie doesn't want a relationship. Lori's, getting out of a very long-term relationship. So you're like, this could be a bad idea. But the way that the author handles this in terms of, Lori's slow, but, very thorough and thoughtful journey of, getting out of like reflecting on her relationship with Dan, reflecting on how it wasn't as healthy or as good as she thought it'd been, reflecting on how being with him sort of stifled her, you know what I mean? Because she propped him up in a lot of ways.
Right.
And he very much did not, he was kind of like a child. Like she took care of him basically. Yeah,
because they just you get into the habit, and you're together so long that just becomes your reality.
Right, exactly. So kind of her learning to be on her own, kind of her relearning about her inner spark and fire, her friendship with Jamie, because it doesn't really become romantic for a while. You know what I mean? It's just them being friends, and like the lines kind of slowly being blurred. And then Lori has all these, you'll learn like her family issues too. And like it was an interesting comparison about how Dan would help Lori navigate these issues versus Jamie's perspective.
Okay.
In terms of, what you're willing, like what boundaries you have with your family and what you're willing to put up with. I'll just say that. So it was such a good book. Lori also had really excellent female friendships. It was one of those where it was like, even though you didn't see a lot of her friends, when you did see them, they were full, well-rounded people.
Mm-hmm.
And you as a reader knew that they had full lives that you could imagine. You know what I mean? They weren't just there to be props for Lori. Also, the phrase self-loathing straight person was in there, and I was like, oh, there I am. Anyway, so
I found myself in this book. I'm supposed to find myself in every book, aren't I?
Oh, I'm in this picture and I don't like it. So I really can't recommend If I Never Met You enough. I think that was probably my favorite rom-com, a romance book that I read this year. It was just great. I like to go back. I ended up buying it, and I am going back and like rereading my favorite parts. I think Jamie is he is so great. And also his journey as a character was really, really fulfilling. And honestly, like, I was just like, oh my God, I think Jamie and I are like soulmates. Like, he and I just think about things in the same way so much. Like, we're both kind of like no nonsense, like ambitious, like, anyway, so very, very good read, depicts healthy relationships very, very well.
Love it.
Can't recommend that book enough.
And I feel like I don't get to read enough romance where you have a couple who's been together that long and they have this like, you know, epic breakup, and picking up the pieces after that. Like, I feel like a lot of the times when I read a romance that kind of starts with a breakup, it's, you know, it's somebody that they've been with for like the last year or two. And like, there's always the seed of doubt when you hear them talk about them, like, oh, yeah, well, they didn't show up to the wedding. Okay, well, that's a red flag, obviously. Or, you know, oh, he's always like put her down in front of his friends because he's ashamed of her. Like, we know that we don't trust them, like, from the very beginning. But like, one of the books that I loved a lot last year was one of our book club reads for the podcast called Make Me Hate You by Candy Steiner. And Candy writes like really angsty romance in general. But what I loved about this book was that this was one of those ones where you have the heroine who's in a relationship and basically goes home to attend this wedding for like one of her best friends. And I want to say the best friend is also like the sister. Somebody's related to somebody. No. Okay. Wait, no. I think the brother of the girl who's getting married, the brother of the bride, is the main girl's ex-boyfriend, her ex-love. And so they're basically like thrown back together for this wedding. And so what's different about it is that the man that she's in a relationship with is a great guy. Like, he's a great partner. It kind of has like the Notebook vibes where you're like, oh no, you have to choose between these two amazing men who love you and like neither one would be a bad option kind of thing. So it's something that's really different from what I read, because I do not like the love triangle. I do not like any hint of potential cheating. So like,
I don't either.
That's not usually for me, but I loved this story so much because I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be happy with whoever you choose. I see the benefits of whoever you choose. Also, I wouldn't mind if you go home alone because that might be good for you. And spoiler alert, she does for a while. She takes a little break. So I really loved that one. So I don't usually do like an end of year, you know, top list or anything like that. And I won't say that Make Me Hate You was my favorite read in 2020, but it's definitely one that made me think a lot about relationships and just the fact that they're all different. Like, you can't judge a relationship if you're not in it because you don't know what's going on in it. So, you know, that's my single woman rant for the day.
No, I love that. Yeah, I think that's what's great about, I feel like we're sort of in a renaissance of romance books, especially contemporary, where, you know, they're books that obviously you want to have fun in and you love the structure, but they're taking tropes that have previously had so many problematic elements to them and kind of refreshing them and reframing them in with like modern sensibilities and having these discussions, you know, about, you know, different types of relationships. What does a healthy one look like? Talking about like growth of a character.
We need it. We need all of it.
Yeah. You want the fluff, but you want, you know, it to be grounded in something too, I think. So I'm really enjoying this era for sure.
So what do you think? Is there a romance novel that you have to write on the horizon?
Well, I actually decided, normally for my job, I travel a lot, especially in November. But since I didn't go anywhere this year, I decided to do NaNoWriMo. So I did
Yes.
actually, and it's not done, but I am writing something that could be classified as romance, which is
Oh,
hilarious again, considering single. So, I mean, who knows if anything will come of it, but it's been really nice to sit down and, continue to flex my writing skills. I think, as I said earlier, it's not like I planned on really being an author, not seriously, even though I've always written in some capacity, whether it was, short stories, fan fiction, poetry, whatever. But so it's been really nice with single forcing me basically to write consistently.
yeah.
It's been nice to sort of continue to like ride that wave. And I found that being creative consistently has been like really good for me, like mentally.
Yeah.
So it's been really, really fun. But yeah, so it is a romance. So we'll see if anything comes of it.
Good. I'm glad.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. I think we have to talk about one of the best parts of this book, which is, first of all, the whole Aunt Carol thing. Do you have an actual Aunt Carol? Because I had an Aunt Carol. So
Oh my
I
God.
I was like, "Oh my God, is she talking to my Aunt Carol? What's going on?"
I do not have a literal Aunt Carol.
Okay.
No,
But
no. This is
Carol's like the figurative Karen.
Yeah, she's basically, you're basically, the a mashup of like your aunt, your mom's best friend, your neighbor down the street. You know what I mean? Like any
Yes.
sort of well-meaning but a little off the mark acquaintance in your life, who means well when they're asking you these questions, but
Yep.
you're like, oh boy, you're like,
Yep.
okay,
It's true.
yep. I was like, yeah, why don't you ask me about my job or like my friends or like my hobbies? Like, why is it always about,
Anything else?
who
I
I'm
had a friend
seeing?
who went to a liberal arts college, and the summer before she left for college, she was waitressing at an event. I think it was like a wedding, and one of the people at the wedding asked her about herself. She said she was going to this school, and the woman's reply was, "Well, that's a liberal arts college. How are you going to meet a husband?"
Oh my God. It's like how you're like, so if you're not getting an MRS degree,
Yeah,
what are you doing?
exactly. What are you doing? Oh, I'm going to become a teacher. Ironically, she did meet her husband at a wedding, which I find hysterical.
Oh my
But
God, I love that.
I do
So
love
funny.
that Aunt Carol is she's like the one constant character throughout the book, which I
Yeah.
really enjoy. And there's a section that you've included that reads as a Mad Libs that we call reasons why you just don't want to be set up right now. Thanks, Aunt Carol. And so I thought it might be fun if we could play a little Aunt Carol Mad Libs, maybe not the whole thing, because
Sure.
obviously we want people to buy the book and do it them damn selves. But let's do a section. So I'm going to ask you for some parts of speech, and we're going to tell Aunt Carol why you don't want to be set up. So
Ooh.
let's start with a noun.
A noun. Okay, pillow.
I'm going to make it a plural noun. I hope that's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
How about a name?
George.
George. Solid name. It makes me think of the Brady Bunch, because she would always say, what's her face? Jan would always say like her fake boyfriend's name was like George Glass.
Oh God, that's right. Maybe that's what I was thinking of. I don't even know why I thought of the name George, but yeah, solid name.
Why not? Okay,
Why
verb.
not? Verb. Run.
I might make it ran,
Okay.
just
Yeah.
to make it make
Yeah.
sense. And another noun.
Another noun. Teacup.
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay, a verb and another noun.
Skip.
Ooh,
And then nail polish.
nail polish. Okay, and then we'll do a couple more. I need 2 locations.
2 locations. Okay. I'm going to say New Orleans.
Ooh.
Uh-huh. And I'm going to say Philadelphia, which is one of the last places I went before lockdown.
Perfect memories. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then the last two, I need one more verb and one more noun.
Swim or swam, whatever you need to change it to be.
Okay.
And then for the noun, robot.
Okay. All right. All right. So this is an excerpt from Reasons Why You Just Don't Want to Be Set Up Right Now. Thanks, Aunt Carol, a Mad Libs fill in the blank section. So I'm going to start in the second paragraph where we say, also, my personal life is an absolute mess. Last week, my apartment became infested with pillows, and it's driving me and my cat crazy. My cat George is so agitated that she ran the teacup, and my landlord is no help. He told me to skip the nail polish. What does he know? I have to take care of my home before I can even think about inviting someone into it. And remember my upcoming trip to New Orleans? I have to plan for that. I'm going to go see Philadelphia. And of course, I'm going to swim the robot. It's a must-do, according to all of the guides.
Oh my God.
So there you go. Just a couple of reasons for Aunt Carol why you don't want to be set up right now. You've got an infestation of pillows. You're planning trips to New Orleans and swimming the robot in Philadelphia. Like, you are solidly booked.
I'm booked and busy. I have things to do, places to see, etc. Aunt Carol. Yeah, she kind of just came about. That wasn't even intentional. It was just like, she was just a great placeholder in terms of like any sort of society person, whatever in your life.
Well, and it's true because it's very clearly, and I know you kind of mentioned this earlier, but this is definitely not a book that is specifically telling people who are in relationships that they're doing something wrong. It's not. It's not attacking men. It's not attacking middle-aged white men. I mean, and that's definitely a conversation that we have so often. This is very specifically like, I want you to think about your choices. And, if you're single, ask yourself, what do you like about being single? If you're looking for things to do while you're single, here are a few ideas. And then also, you do offer some ideas for how to improve a dating profile, or, if you are looking to get back into the dating world, here are some of the things that you might think about. So on that note, what's something that you might recommend people highlight in their dating profile if they are one of the people who's decided that I'm going to try dating during a global pandemic?
Oh my God. I that's such a great question because I really avoid those dating apps so much.
They're so tough.
They're so tough. Like, that's not how I like to, again, as I think I said, like, I don't really trust people that easily. So it's like the idea too, where it's like, you just have to decide based on pictures or sentences that like you're into this person, just seems unfathomable to me. But like all my previous relationships, we were friends before we dated. So like, right? Like, I'm like, oh, I trust you as a person. So like, we can do this.
I found that works the best way too, for me personally.
Yeah. So obviously like this day and age isn't really set up for it. And not to mention this specific day and age. Oh God, but what would I put in a profile? Like in terms of conversation starters, I think always asking people their opinion or stating yours is like right off the bat, a conversation starter. Like I asked, I think, what is something in pop culture that you just don't get, or like that's just not for you, you know what I mean? Like I think stuff like that. I always think about like questions, some people will pose randomly like on Twitter or whatever, like tell me about a blah blah blah, give me an opinion or something. There was obviously book Twitter likes to be like, oh, like what, give me a controversial book opinion. So I think that's if it's a kind of profile where you have to ask questions of people, I think those questions are always kind of fun to see like what people like. In terms of like what something about yourself, I mean, I think those opinions are okay too. I know like maybe that can be tricky because I know some of my friends are like, I put in my favorite movie was Mad Max Fury Road, and I had all these men telling me how wrong I was. So I mean, there's always that.
God, people just go out of their way to be dicks sometimes.
They
I mean,
really
it's just
do.
And I'm with you. I do like when people put questions in their dating profiles, just because it kind of shows one, what you're maybe interested in talking about. Like if you're asking a question about books, I'm assuming that you're going to want to have a conversation about books. Great. But also it's inviting conversation. And I know for me, the reason why I've downloaded and deleted and re-downloaded and re-deleted dating apps multiple times is because of the lack of conversation I usually get. I find myself, clearly I said in the beginning of this episode, I love to talk. You know, I just don't always want to be the one that's pushing the conversation or having to ask questions or come up with new things for us to discuss. And that's not to say that I can't date somebody that's more introverted than me, but you know, it's one of the things that has turned me off of dating apps. So when I do see somebody ask a question or want, you know, to know what your opinion is about something else, that's something that really attracts me to somebody in a dating app. So I think that's a great one.
A couple of things. So like one is one thing that got men recently mad on Twitter was women being like sharing dating stories where they're like, yeah, I let a man talk for 40 minutes straight during our date. And then he tells me he thinks we have a great connection. And that's because, it's all about him. And then secondly, one of my favorite quotes actually in a book is from, I want to say it was Rainbow Rowell's Attachments. And it takes place from the man's perspective. Ooh. And he, towards the end of the book, he talks about like why he's in love with his love interest. And I'm just like, this is so romantic. I would love someone to talk about this, like about me. And he's just like, you know, I want to go on a long road trip with her. I want to ask her what she thinks of things, how many stars she would give them and why. And I was like, that's it. That's love.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. If somebody wants to go on a road trip with you, you marry them. Like, that's it right there.
And someone who asks you, who's like, I want to know your opinion about this thing specifically. I want to know how many stars you would give it. And I would like to know why you think so.
Sold.
And I'd be like, I am ready, baby. I'm there with bells on. So
Let's
I thought that was like
thing. Yeah.
deeply romantic. So that's my idea of romance.
I love that. No, I mean, it's so funny. I know we're different signs. You're a Scorpio and I'm an Aries, but I feel like we share a lot of the same traits. So clearly we're looking for the same man. So we're going to have to work on that.
Right. Well, I think, you know, as someone who's deeply into astrology, maybe we have compatible Venus signs, so that can definitely affect it. I was going to almost semi-seriously be like, yeah, just put your whole birth chart in there. Why not? But I mean, put your whole birth chart in your dating chart. Yeah, I feel like dating is hard. Dating profiles are hard. Dating apps are hard. I think I put in one of mine that I liked books and beer. So it's kind of like, okay, you know kind of what I like, but then hopefully you can, there's things that you can ask me, like, what kind of books do you like to read? What kind of beer do you like to drink? Oh, there's the
what's your favorite bookstore in town? Or like where, you know, what bars do you like to frequent for trivia night? Like there's so many, I like that. It's vague enough where you're not saying, don't message me if you haven't read this book and you don't drink this beer, because that is like the quickest way to turn somebody off. But it's also inviting conversation. And you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb and say a book like yours is also one where this could be a conversation topic. So you've given single people something else to talk about. So thank you for that.
Oh my gosh, no problem. But yeah, I think that's kind of what I think with this book, to sort of like summarize it, I guess, like if you've ever read like an issue of like Cosmo, it's kind of like, I mean, less about like sexual positions or whatever, but like if you've read a recent issue of Cosmo, it's kind of, I wanted that to sort of be like that in tone, in terms of like articles that were both fun, that had like quizzes and like, you know, things like MASH, but then also had things that actually like, you know, give you advice about like what happens if you run into your ex, or like, Aunt Carol, this is how you should behave at a wedding. Don't ask the bride or groom when they're going to get pregnant. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff.
Aunt Carol, come on.
Aunt Carol, they just got married. Maybe they want to be, you know, enjoy their time together before they start thinking about kids if they want them. So, you know.
Yeah, it's amazing how Aunt Carol's questions don't even stop even after you found somebody and gotten married.
Right, exactly. So again, like kind of coming back to the idea where this book is, you know, about choices and validating your life choices, whether that's with a partner or by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, society is always going to want more from you. You know, if you're single, why aren't you in a relationship? If you're in a relationship, why aren't you married? If you're married, why don't you have kids? If you have kids, why aren't you doing this parenting technique correctly, etc.? You know what I mean? It just seems like it's never ending in a way, even if these people are, you know, who are asking are very well meaning and who do love you.
Right.
You know, it's kind of just hopefully starting a conversation about perspective and how if these people aren't doing these things, that's okay if they're happy, or like ask them other things about their lives. You know what I mean? Like ask them what books they're reading, ask them what TV shows they like, ask them what they like to do, ask them something like, what are you happy about? What is something you've done recently that you're proud of? You know, just looking at people as whole people rather than, you know, I just think who you're seeing and who you're sleeping with is just so boring. It's like one of the most boring aspects of a person. Like, who cares?
It's so true. Here one day, gone the next. But
right.
it's a brand new year, and like it's an opportunity. You know, we've talked about goal setting and resolutions, and whether you make them or not, and you make a checklist like Melissa and I do, or, you know, you just kind of reflect on things that you really appreciated about 2020, or things that went well in your life, whether it was at work or in a relationship, or you moved into a new apartment, or you bought the dress that you've been wanting to buy for the last, you know, 3 months, and whatever it is, you know, it's a great opportunity to start a new year thinking about what the positive side of things. You know, what do you really like about your life? And if there is something you don't like, you know, maybe you're single and you don't want to be, how can you change that without putting so much pressure on yourself and letting Aunt Carol dictate your life? So I highly recommend picking up a copy of Single and Forced to Mingle by Melissa, because it's available now. And it's a great way to start the year. It's a great quick read that, you know, once again, I think there's a little something in there for everybody, single or not. So Melissa, thank you so much for joining me today and talking about your book, playing Mad Libs, you know, talking about some of your favorite romance reads. I feel like I'm going to have you back to talk more romance.
I would be so happy to come and talk about romance anytime. So first of all, thank you so much for having me on today. This has been a fantastic way to start my new year for sure. But yeah, my friend Tiara and I love romance books so much that we compiled like a Google Doc of some of our favorites, so that if any of our friends are like interested in trying romance for the first time, we have like a starter pack basically of some of our favorites, and we even section it off into you know, like period romances versus contemporary romances. So, you know, because some people are, you know, I think even more one or the other, even when it comes to romance.
Right.
So, you know, we were very prepared, very organized.
You know, I love that you're a converter of the genre, you know, like I am, because that's the whole reason I have this podcast, is to convert people into loving the genre as much as I do. That's always the goal, at least.
Right. Or at least, at the very least, again, like respect people's choices and be like, romance isn't just, you know, bodice rippers, even though those are so fun.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not a genre of book to like look down upon. They're
No.
very smart. They're written by very smart people, Stacey Abrams included.
Praise
right?
be.
You know, romance is a ballad genre, and it should be held up just like other ones are.
Amen. Amen. And I can't think of a better note to end that on. So thanks again, and have a great 2021. I know it's only the beginning, but here's hoping it's better than last year.
Listen, begin as you mean to go on, and the beginning has been great. So
there you go. Thanks so much for listening. Boobies and Newbies is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts. You can follow Boobies and Newbies on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Boobies Podcast.